Hello and welcome back to the OTB channel. Something a little bit different today. You all know about Arch Linux and how popular it currently is. Why is that though? Well, I'm going to look at 5 reasons why I think Arch Linux seems to be riding the crest of a wave at the moment. Okay, welcome back. So why is Arch Linux so popular? Well, you know I'm an Arch user, and the likes of DT, he's an Arch user, and a number of other YouTube, I won't call us celebrities, YouTube video producers also use Arch. Esnix, of course, we mustn't forget him. And I think we use Arch for our own reasons because I suppose ultimately we find it reliable, it works, it does what we need it to do, and success breeds success. As Arch has become more and more popular and people have realised just how flexible it is, it's become almost the go-to distro for your Linux enthusiast. Or for many Linux enthusiasts. I don't want to, paint everyone with the same brush. That has not always been the case. When I started using Linux back in 2004, my goodness, 17 years ago, that makes me feel even older than I am. Arch was really nowhere to be seen. I don't even know if it existed in those days. But the big division really was between Debian-based systems, and of course Ubuntu came about in 2004, but there was plain Debian as well. And I'm sure, there was Simply Mepis and those sort of distros. And then on the other side, you had the RPM-based distros. So your Red Hat, but that was already a commercial product by then. You had OpenSUSE, you had Mandrake, you had Fedora Core. And the battle, such as it was between the Debs and the RPMs. But over the years, that balance certainly seems to have shifted. And what we see now is Debs are still really important. I'd go as far as to say Ubuntu, which is a Debian-based system, is probably still the most popular distro of all of them. Simply because it's been around so long and it's built up a great reputation. But Arch is starting to get there. Of course, we don't have any stats to prove any of this absolutely, but I get the sense that Arch is just going from strength to strength to strength. It seems that you can go on endlessly looking at different Arch distros, and there must be some reason for this popularity. So I've been thinking about that yesterday and today, and I've come up with 5 reasons why I think Arch Linux is so popular. Okay, package management. Before we start, let me just say I noticed on those introductory clips that for some reason my audio seemed to be just a millisecond out of sync, so I've just made an adjustment and apologies for that. Hopefully it's all good now. Package management is definitely one of Arch Linux's strengths. Pacman is absolutely brilliant. It's easy to use. It's really a command line program more than anything else, but so is apt. But comparing apt and Pacman side by side, which I've done quite a few times, not by timing them or anything like that, just watching them perform, Pacman is super fast. So in terms of package management, Arch has a really competent package manager in Pacman. But package management goes far beyond the tools that are available for us to manage packages. It's also about the number of packages that we have in repos. And the Arch repositories are very large, that's for sure, But what really, in my opinion, sets Arch apart is the AUR, the Arch User Repository. Some people love it, some people hate it. Not all the packages in the AUR will work, because I don't think it has really any quality checking goes on, but the vast majority do. What this actually means for your Linux user is if a package isn't in the standard Arch repositories, the chances are somebody has submitted it to the AUR. And that's a brilliant thing. Because back in the day, if you didn't have the package in your repositories and you couldn't find a ready roll deb or something like that, well, your only options were to download the source code and do a configure, make, install, which was all well and good. But if you install a package manually like that, you can't then control it with your package manager. And upgrades and installations are not as straightforward. What the AUR allows us to do is it allows to take the source code of packages that aren't in the standard Arch repos, and it allows us to compile them and then manage them with a range of different package managers known as AUR helpers. This seems like a little bit of a dual approach, because I've just sung the praises of Pacman, and you can't manage the AUR with Pacman, but you can manage the AUR with things such as Yay and a range of other packages, PMAC even. And it makes the whole process really easy. I don't know what the final number of packages are in both the AUR and in the Pacman repos, but I would guess that it's probably more than is actually in Debian. To me, that is such a big draw, because if I want to install a particular window manager or a particular package that I've seen somewhere or on a review, chances are I can do it in Arch. Even with the likes of Ubuntu, if I wanted to install something from their package repositories, let's just take, for example, LeftWM, the window manager that I use. I don't think it's in the standard Ubuntu repos. It is in the AUR, so no problem there. Now, by pick your poison, I mean I'm referring to choice. And I think this is another big feature of Arch Linux and Arch-based distros, because I'm not restricting this discussion to plain Arch. I'm talking about the whole ecosystem out there of Arch and Arch-based distros. And you get to choose what you want. I mean, you've obviously seen the sort of distros that I review, and I've lost count of the number of Arch distros that I've had a look at and done a quick review of. But it seems to me that the choice for Arch and Arch-based systems at the moment is just massive. You can do a standard Archway install. No problem whatsoever. People think it's hard, but it's not hard. You just follow the superb wiki that exists for the distro, and it doesn't take as long as you think, and it's not as difficult as, I don't know, the mystique that seems to surround it. If you'd rather have an easy install, there are a plethora of scripts out there that allow you to do a quick install with very little knowledge. Be they good or bad, they exist. There are also a whole range of systems that use something like Calamaris, so it's just a click, 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 and essentially you have an Arch system. I'm thinking here specifically of the likes of EndeavourOS and Manjaro, both of which are absolutely superb Arch-based distros, and together probably, I'm guessing here, probably have a larger user base than plain Arch. And the beauty about having this choice is, even if you're relatively new to Linux and you don't feel comfortable doing a command line install, you can get up and running with an Arch-based system pretty quickly, and you can learn to manage and maintain that system, which is a big thing. Of course, I haven't even touched on, you can probably pick a distro out there that has your window manager of choice, your desktop environment of choice, your color scheme and theme of choice. I mean, we have things like Garuda now, which is all singing, all dancing with go faster stripes, and that appeals to a certain user group. But whatever you want, there seems to be a variant of it within the world of Arch or Arch-based distros, which means that if you like Arch and you like the package management system, you don't really need to look beyond that. Make a list of what your other choices are, and you're pretty sure to be able to find something. If you don't want to build it and customize it yourself, which of course is always an option. So pick your poison. It is all about choice, and it's a definite strength. I was about to break into song there, rolling, 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 but I cannot hold a note, so I'm not going to subject you to that. I think being a rolling release is a strength. Now, this is perhaps one of those more debatable strengths. It might not be something that you particularly like. Nevertheless, a rolling release means you install once and then you maintain and upgrade. And you're not having to look at a new installation every 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or whatever else. This system that I'm on at the moment, I've been running non-stop since installation about 18 months ago, I think it is. And it's as fresh and new as it was the day that I installed it, because it's been kept constantly updated. And there are real advantages to having or to installing a rolling release. One, I've already mentioned, you don't need to keep installing point releases to upgrade. Although, to be fair, it's similar in that sense to Debian. You can do a dist upgrade and you can move on to the next version, but it's not quite as simple and straightforward. Secondly, being a rolling release, it means that you are bang up to date with the latest bleeding edge packages. And that's good for a couple of reasons. One, it means that you can take advantages of new features as they're released on various applications. And secondly, if Linux is going to support the latest and greatest hardware, well, the variant of Linux you want is probably something like Arch, which is going to have the latest kernel. Whereas if you're going to install something like Debian Stable, the chances of it working with the latest and greatest are a lot less. So there's some strengths there. I appreciate that some people prefer stability and point releases over a rolling release, and I'd agree it's horses for courses. So on my website, for instance, that's running on top of Debian Stable. I would not dream of putting Arch on a web server. I just wouldn't. It's far too much maintenance. You want something that you're just going to install, run updates once a month or so, and it's just going to be solid as the day is long, which is what Debian is. But for a desktop system, I think a rolling release is the way to go. I use Arch, by the way, as if you didn't know. And I mention that here because I think that expression sort of says a lot about how Arch itself has become a meme. There is something about the system that I don't know. I don't believe it's true, but it also almost seems to have a mythical quality that Arch is associated with Linux users who know what they're doing, who are not noobs. They are part of the elite, and Arch is a prestigious distro to run. Now, I think all of that's rubbish, because I think the whole concept of elitism in Linux is by the by. There are certainly much harder distros to maintain and install. I'm thinking of Gen 2, Linux from scratch, perhaps even Slackware. Arch is not in that class. if you can do an Archway install even, all you have to do is a copy and paste from the Arch wiki, and it's done and dusted in no time. And once you've got your system up and running, it does, there's almost an anticlimax. You start to say to yourself, well, that wasn't that hard, was it? Nevertheless, it does seem to have this mystique surrounding it that, if you're an Arch user, you must know what you're doing. I think less and less so these days can we even say that's anywhere near the truth, especially with all of the Arch-based distros such as Endeavour and Manjaro. It's easy to install, and learning to maintain it isn't that difficult. Nevertheless, it still does have that mystique, that certain something. And perhaps it's because if you're an Arch user and you install Arch or an Arch-based distro, it doesn't try to hide the fact that the terminal is there and the chances are that you will, use it. It is not trying to direct you down the road of only using GUI tools. I mean, even if we take one of the, what I think is the best Arch-based distro, Endeavour OS, I mean, that heralds itself as a terminal-centric distro. It does expect its user base to go to the command line for some of the maintenance and tasks that need to be done. And I think that's, the same can be said of any distro out there that you could name. But sometimes you do get the impression with other user-friendly distros that they almost seem to suggest you'll never have to open one of those scary black boxes and type stuff that you don't understand. So, yeah, it's a Linux user's distro. It encourages you to get down and dirty and to apply your own customizations. And whether or not Arch Linux users do have more Linux knowledge than the average user using another system, I've absolutely no idea. It might have been the case once before, but I don't necessarily think it's the case now. Nevertheless, we still have got this meme going on. Running Arch still does have a certain status. They used to say that nobody ever got sacked by buying from companies like IBM. And with Arch, I suppose you can also say nobody's really going to take the mickey out of you if you're running Arch. Not something that can be said of some of the other, perhaps more user-friendly distros, if that's the appropriate phrase, which I'm not sure it is. But anyway, let's move on. And at number 5, I really couldn't finish a video like this without mentioning the sources of support that are available if you are an Arch or an Arch-based distro user. I'm not talking here just about forums. I'm mainly talking about the superb Arch Wiki, which is a resource, as far as I'm concerned, like no other. It's not just a resource for Arch users. I know users of other distros refer to the Arch Wiki to resolve particular problems, but it's my go-to every time I'm stuck. I go to the Arch Wiki to see if there's a solution. Now, combine that with the fact that there are some friendly forums out there, especially forums like Manjaro and the Endeavour forum, and I'll grant you that the standard Arch forum hasn't got a particularly good reputation for new users. I'm not qualified to say because I don't use it, but that's my general impression. But nevertheless, there are sources of support out there anyway. And I suppose because success begats success, and because Arch has become so popular, you can usually find advice and help anywhere, really. I mean, let's face it, you can find umpteen YouTube videos about Arch. I noticed this morning that Esnix had released a video talking about the little issue that's cropped up with the latest version of Pac-Man 6 and how it stopped PMAC working, and talking about, how we should be reacting and what we can actually do. So you can always find answers. Always being able to find answers somehow helps to create a sense of adventure, that you're perhaps prepared to do things that you wouldn't normally experiment with. And for me, it's that sense of experimentation that I think Arch allows, and through its infrastructure really promotes. If I want to install some obscure package or window manager, chances are I can do it really easily. If I want to get down and dirty in the terminal, same thing. If I want to experiment with themes and different colors and different types of terminals, it is all there. Now, none of this is unavailable in other distros. It just seems that sense of experimentation seems to be more upfront with Arch, or at least that's my impression. But ultimately, the support that's there and the sources of reference that you can draw upon are just amazing. So, a bit of an Arch love fest here, and I make no apologies for that. If it's good, it's good. There are downsides, though, and let's have a chat about those. So, there's always a downside, isn't there? And this section is probably for someone who is an Arch user and I like the system. Initially, there's no downsides as far as I'm concerned, but there are. Of course, there are. The main one being, as a rolling release, you're going to get lots of updates coming down the line, and that has two implications, really. One, it's going to break the system at some point. It will. It's just the nature of the beast, and you're going to need to fix it. Most of the fixes are straightforward. The support is usually out there, but you are going to get little bits and pieces that just need to be tweaked to get your system up and running. Secondly, because there are so many updates coming down the line, you are going to need a fast internet connection. If you have a really slow internet connection, I can imagine it being a real pain to run. So it needs the internet, it really does. And last but not least, I think this downside or disadvantage, if you like, is almost a result of Arch's success and the fact that we have so many user-friendly Arch distros out there at the moment. I don't ultimately feel that Arch should be a first user system. I think people coming to Arch should probably have already spent 6 months or so using a different, perhaps stable release of some distro, and then move on to Arch when they have a better idea of what Linux is all about. Otherwise, they run the risk with an easy click, 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 click install of finding a breakage happens, perhaps a minor breakage. They don't know how to fix it, and it puts them off for life. So I do think you do need a certain degree of knowledge to run an Arch system effectively. Not masses. I think it would be a good second distro, but I wouldn't recommend it to somebody brand new to Linux. But that's it, really. I can't think of any other downsides worth mentioning. So guys, that's the end of this video. Come and join me on the Facebook group or library. And I'd like to say thank you to my Patreons. Thank you, guys. Your support has been absolutely wonderful the last 12 months or so. And I'll see you next week because it's a lovely day and I'm about to go out on my bike again. So thanks very much. Have a great weekend.